Wow, you really went all out this time, didn't you? You sent us a whole book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, published in 2018.
And in Arabic?
And in Arabic. So we are going to take a deep dive into this. We read it and, well, we are going to break down all the key elements for you.
So you can implement them in your own life.
So you can implement them in your own life. That's right. So you don't feel like you have to tackle this whole thing yourself.
That's right. We will do the heavy lifting for you.
Yes, exactly. So our goal today, well, first of all, this book is all about habits. How to build good ones, how to break bad ones.
Right, exactly. So the mission here is to really dive deep into how to build good habits and break bad ones, as outlined in the book by James Clear.
Okay, sounds good. So Clear starts off by talking about something that I think is really interesting. He talks about the power of small changes.
Tiny changes, little 1% improvements.
Right. He doesn't talk about these huge instant makeovers. It's like, just these little tiny little things that you can do every day.
And they compound over time.
That compound over time. He gives a couple of really interesting examples. One of them is a woman named Lisa Allen.
Yeah, and Lisa Allen is really interesting because this is where we see this idea of a keystone habit, like how one habit can trigger a whole cascade of other positive changes, even in areas that you might not think are related. So Lisa Allen, she's in her 30s and she's struggling, right? She's got an unhealthy lifestyle. She's got a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And she decides to quit smoking and take up running. And what the scientists find, who studied her, is that this running became what they call a keystone habit.
Okay.
Meaning that it had all these ripple effects.
So it's like a domino effect almost.
Exactly. So it wasn't just that she quit smoking and she started running. Those things, yes, they had a direct impact on her health, but it affected her work.
Really?
It affected her well-being.
Wow.
It affected her spending habits. She started saving more money.
Because she wasn't spending money on cigarettes.
That she wasn't spending money on cigarettes, exactly. So it's this idea that our habits, they're all interconnected. And sometimes if you can just find that one keystone habit that you can shift, it can have all these ripple effects into other areas of your life.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's not like she was trying to improve all of those areas. It just sort of happened as a result of quitting smoking and starting to run.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just individuals though, right? There's this example that Charles Duhigg brings up about this military officer in Iraq.
Yes. This is such a great example of how even small changes in the environment can disrupt bad habits. So you've got this city in Iraq that's troubled by riots. And what you might expect, the traditional approach might be, stricter curfews, more military presence on the streets. But this officer, he's thinking outside the box. He's looking at the patterns, and he notices that a lot of the riots seem to be originating around these, food vendors in the public squares.
Food vendors? How does that cause a riot? Well, think about it, right? The food vendors, they become a central gathering point. People get hungry. They all go to these squares to eat. And you've got all these people congregated together. Tensions rise and things escalate.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So his solution, remove the food vendors.
Really?
Really. And what happens? The pattern of the riots it dissolves.
Wow.
People get hungry at different times. They go home to eat. They're not all congregated together. And that one simple environmental change, just removing the food vendors, disrupts the entire pattern of these riots.
That is so clever. I mean, you would never think that food vendors would be the cause of riots, but it makes perfect sense.
Right. It's about understanding those underlying patterns and how even a small tweak can have a big impact.
And then there's the example of adding streetlights.
Yes. That's another classic example. You put streetlights in a dark neighborhood. And it might seem obvious, right, that it would improve safety. But what's often surprising is how dramatic the decrease in crime can be.
Yeah, just a little bit of light can make a huge difference. Okay, so we've seen the power of small changes, but Clear also talks about how important our identity is in forming our habits. It's not just about achieving a goal, it's about who we believe we are.
Yeah, it's about aligning your actions with your identity. It's less about saying, I want to lose weight, and more about saying, I am a healthy person.
That's a good point. So it's not like, I want to eat healthy so I can fit into these genes. It's more about, I eat healthy because that's who I am.
Exactly. And we see this really clearly in religious practices.
Oh, right.
The dietary restrictions in Judaism and Islam, the daily meditation in Buddhism, Mormons avoiding caffeine and stimulants. These are all habits that are deeply tied to their identity.
To their sense of self. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's probably a lot easier to stick to those habits if they're part of your identity, rather than just something you're trying to do to achieve a specific outcome.
Right, it's more intrinsic. It's more about who you are at your core. And if you look at the research, the Pew Research Center has done some interesting studies on this. And they found that highly religious people across different faiths tend to have very different daily habits compared to people who are less religious. They're more likely to engage in things like weekly worship, volunteer work, donating to charity, keeping in touch with family.
It sounds like there's a reinforcing effect there too, right? Like if you're part of a community where those habits are valued, it's easier to stick to them.
Absolutely. Religious institutions, a community emphasis on these practices, it all reinforces those habits. For example, nearly 2/3 of Christians who see giving to the poor as an essential part of their Christian identity are also more likely to actually donate time or money. So it's not just about believing something, it's about that belief translating to action, and often that's facilitated by the community.
So community can play a really powerful role in supporting our habits. Okay, so we've talked about the power of small changes and how our identity influences our habits. What about accountability? Clear talks about that a lot. And also about what he calls commitment devices.
Accountability is huge. It's that feeling of being responsible to someone or something.
Like having some skin in the game.
Exactly. And it's often more effective when you're accountable to people who share your values, your identity.
Right, like if you're accountable to your family, your friends, your community, people who you respect and who you don't want to let down.
And think about religiously devout individuals.
Yeah.
They often have this built-in accountability, right? They're accountable to their family, their community, even to God.
That's a powerful motivator. So what about these commitment devices?
Well, commitment device is basically anything you can do to make it harder to engage in a bad habit. Like if you want to spend less money, you cut up your credit cards.
Oh, right.
Or you only carry cash. So it's about creating these obstacles, these barriers that make it harder to slip up.
And it's interesting, because we were talking earlier about mobile devices.
Yeah, how they were supposed to make our lives easier.
Right, make our lives easier, more accessible. But now we've got all these issues with digital addiction.
Right, it's this paradox of technology. And Apple, actually, they recognize this. And back in September 2018, they introduced screen time as part of iOS 12.
Screen time, that's the thing that tracks how much time you spend on your phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives you these detailed reports so you can see, oh my gosh, I spent like 5 hours on Instagram today. But more importantly, it allows you to set limits. So you can say, okay, I only want to spend an hour a day on social media.
And it blocks you after that.
Well, you can override it.
Yeah.
But it at least forces you to stop and think.
Okay.
It creates that friction.
It's like a little speed bump.
Exactly. And then there's the Do Not Disturb feature, which allows you to silence notifications, so you're not constantly being bombarded.
Oh, yeah, I love that feature. So it's basically about making it harder to engage in those bad digital habits.
Right, making it less automatic, less mindless.
And other companies are doing similar things, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Around the same time, in late 2018, Android, Instagram, Facebook, they were all developing similar features. Because they recognize that this is a problem.
That we need help controlling our digital habits.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about accountability, commitment devices. What about the fact that, when you're trying to build a new habit, it can be really discouraging because you don't see results right away?
Yeah, that's the problem with delayed gratification. We tend to focus on the immediate, the present moment. And we forget that the results of our actions often take time to show up.
Like if you're trying to learn a new language, you can study for months and still feel like you're not making much progress.
Exactly. But the difference between 2 months and 2 years of consistent practice is enormous. It's just that in the moment, it's hard to see that future payoff.
Yeah. And I think it's because we have a hard time connecting with our future selves. Like when you're young, it's hard to imagine yourself being old.
Right. You almost see your future self as a stranger.
And so it's harder to make sacrifices in the present for that stranger.
There's actually some interesting research on this. They found that if you show young people digitally aged photos of themselves, like with wrinkles and gray hair.
What?
Yeah, it sounds weird, but it actually works. It makes them more likely to save for retirement.
Really? Because they can actually picture themselves as old.
Exactly. It makes that future self feel more real, more relatable. And so they're more willing to make sacrifices in the present for that future self.
That's amazing. So it's all about making that connection with our future selves. And I think, another thing that Clear talks about is how we frame our habits. Like if we focus on the negative aspects, it's going to be a lot harder to stick to them.
Absolutely. It's all about mindset. Instead of thinking, oh, I have to give up this, or this is going to be so hard, focus on the positive benefits.
So like if you're trying to go to bed earlier, instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to miss my favorite TV show, think about how much more rested you'll feel in the morning.
Exactly. And not only that, but try to make the habit itself enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're trying to go to bed earlier, invest in some nice sheets, some comfy pajamas.
Yeah.
Create a relaxing bedtime routine.
Like a hot bath, a cup of tea.
Exactly. Makes it something you look forward to.
So it's not just about forcing yourself to do something, it's about making it something that you actually want to do.
Right. It's about making it easy, making it attractive, making it rewarding.
And Clear also talks about the importance of being specific, right? Like if you just have this vague goal, it's not as effective.
Yeah, vagueness is the enemy of action. Instead of saying, I want to get more sleep, say, I will go to bed at 10 p.m. every night.
So make it a clear, actionable plan.
Exactly. The more specific you are, the more likely you are to actually follow through.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've talked about framing our habits positively, being specific. What about when the habit itself is just like really hard? Like what if it's something that you just dread doing?
Well, that's where the idea of making habits easy comes in. And it might sound counterintuitive, but the easier you can make a habit, the more likely you are to stick to it.
So it's not about pushing yourself to the limit right from the start.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's about starting small, building momentum.
Okay.
And one of the best examples of this is the concept of marathon cleaning.
Marathon cleaning.
Yeah, it's this thing that a lot of people do. They let their house get really messy, and then they spend an entire Saturday cleaning it from top to bottom.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been there.
Right. And the problem is, it's so exhausting, it's so overwhelming, that you end up dreading cleaning altogether.
Yeah, and then you put it off, and the cycle just continues.
Exactly. So what's the solution? Make it easier. Instead of trying to do everything at once, break it down into smaller chunks.
Okay, so like 15 minutes a day.
Exactly. Or even less, like spend 5 minutes cleaning the kitchen counter.
Yeah.
Or spend 10 minutes decluttering your desk. Just do a little bit each day, consistently.
And it's amazing how much you can accomplish when you break it down like that. It doesn't feel as overwhelming.
Right. And it's more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, because you're not burning yourself out. Okay, so we've talked about making habits easy. What about the fact that, bad habits often give us immediate gratification, while good habits take longer to pay off?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. We're wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And bad habits often offer that quick hit of pleasure, while good habits often require us to delay gratification.
Like eating a donut versus going for a run.
Exactly. The donut gives you that immediate sugar rush, but the run, the benefits take longer to show up.
And it's harder to motivate yourself when the reward is so far off in the future.
Right. So it's about recognizing that trade-off and being willing to delay gratification for the long-term benefits.
And this reminds me of something we talked about before with the Wirecutter's Guide to Mobile Security. Like, taking those extra steps to secure your accounts, it might seem like a hassle in the moment.
Exactly. But the long-term benefits are huge.
It's like two-factor authentication. It's a little bit annoying to have to enter that code every time you log in.
Yeah.
But it's a small price to pay for peace of mind.
Right. And strong passwords, too. It's tempting to just use the same password for everything, or use something easy to remember, but that makes you so much more vulnerable to hacking.
And the damage from getting hacked can be so much worse than the inconvenience of having to remember a strong password.
Absolutely. So it's about shifting your perspective, thinking about the long-term consequences.
And it's interesting because technology can actually help us with this, right?
Yeah.
Like password managers, they can generate and store strong passwords for you.
Yeah, they take the mental load off. And then there are things like automatic software updates, automatic backups.
Right.
All these things that can help automate those good habits.
So we don't have to think about them as much.
Exactly. It's about making it as easy as possible to do the right thing.
Okay, so we've talked about delayed gratification, the role of technology. What about the environment? Clear talks a lot about how our environment can shape our habits.
The environment is huge. It's not just about willpower. It's about setting yourself up for success. Like, if you're trying to eat healthier, make sure you have healthy food readily available.
Like keep fruit in a bowl on the counter.
Exactly. And keep the junk food out of sight. Or If you're trying to exercise more, make sure you have your workout clothes laid out the night before.
So you're not scrambling around in the morning trying to find them.
Right. Make it as easy as possible to get started. And this applies to the workplace, too. Employers can play a big role in promoting healthy habits.
Like offering healthy snacks in the break room.
Exactly. Or providing standing desks, ergonomic chairs.
Oh, yeah, I love standing desks. They make such a difference.
Right. It's about creating an environment that supports your goals. And you mentioned Dan Buettner's work on the blue zones.
The places where people live the longest, healthiest lives.
Exactly. And one of the things he found is that these communities often have built-in environmental factors that promote healthy habits, like easy access to fresh food, opportunities for physical activity, strong social connections.
It sounds like they've created these environments where the healthy choice is the easy choice.
Right. And while it might not be feasible to recreate those exact environments everywhere, there are definitely things that we can learn from them, like encouraging community gardens, making cities more walkable, promoting social interaction.
So it's not just about individual effort, it's also about creating environments that support our well-being.
Absolutely. And sometimes it might even mean changing your environment altogether.
Like moving to a new city.
Yeah, if your current environment is actively working against your goals.
That's a pretty drastic step.
It is, but sometimes it's necessary. Like if you're struggling with addiction and your current environment is full of triggers, it might be impossible to break free without a fresh start.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the power of small changes to the importance of environment. It's been a really insightful deep dive into atomic habits.
And we've given you, the learner, a lot of practical tools and strategies that you can start using today.
To build better habits, break bad ones, and ultimately live a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, here's a final question for you to ponder. What's one small change you can make to your environment today that would nudge you towards a habit you've been wanting to build?
It could be as simple as putting your running shoes by the door or unsubscribing from those tempting email newsletters, just something small but meaningful.
Because even the smallest changes compounded over time can lead to extraordinary results.
Exactly. That's the power of atomic habits.